Now let's start with today's story. You might call me a good man if I tell you that I am a judge by profession, a man sworn to uphold the law and ensure that justice is served. I work tirelessly so that victims get their due and criminals face the consequences of their actions. Justice, after all, is supposed to be blind, impartial, and unyielding. I've dedicated my life to making sure that ideal is more than just empty rhetoric. But then, you may change your mind about me if I tell you another truth. I am a serial killer. I have killed 2 people, and I will kill more in the future. I don't expect you to understand. Perhaps you'll even despise me. But before you jump to conclusions, let me introduce myself properly. My name is Henry McCarty. I was a Marine who served in the First Iraq War. I've seen things that most people can't even imagine, things that harden a man in ways he never thought possible. I survived that hell, came back home, and tried to build a life away from the violence that had defined my youth. I thought I had escaped it. After retiring from the military, I sought purpose in a new battle, one fought not with guns, but with words and principles. I enrolled in law school, driven by a need to understand the mechanisms of justice. The idea that fairness could be codified into law fascinated me. I wanted to be part of that system, to wield it as a force for good. Law school was grueling but structured, exactly what I needed. I learned to dissect cases, analyze evidence, and craft arguments. More importantly, I learned to navigate the gray areas where morality and legality often blur. The law wasn't always about right and wrong. It was about what could be proven, what could be argued, and sometimes, who had the better lawyer. It was both enlightening and disillusioning. After graduation, I spent 15 years working on cases as a defense attorney, then later as a prosecutor. I saw the system from both sides, and it was rarely pretty. There were victories, moments when justice was truly served, but there were also failures that gnawed at me. Cases where the guilty walked free, shielded by technicalities or corruption. Cases where the innocent were ground down by a system that saw them as just another file on a crowded docket. I became a judge because I wanted to make a difference, to be the steady hand that ensured fairness and integrity in my courtroom. Sitting on that bench gave me a sense of authority and responsibility unlike anything I'd felt before. The gavel was my new weapon, and I wielded it with conviction. I built a reputation for being tough but fair, a man who wouldn't tolerate deceit or manipulation in his court. But I'm not here to waste your time with a long flashback of my life. Let's make it short and get straight to the point. The reason I became a killer. I was married to Brenda McCarty, a strong and compassionate woman who supported me through the long nights and moral dilemmas that came with the job. We had a son, Timothy, who was the light of my life. My family grounded me, gave me a reason to keep fighting for justice even when the system seemed broken. Timothy was never the great athlete. I might have been a Marine and a physical specimen, but God has his ways, giving us gifts and sometimes taking things away. Timothy had intelligence in spades. He was a gifted student, always excelling at academics but struggling with sports and physical activities. Brenda once insisted we enrolled him in wrestling. I remember that conversation vividly. Henry, he just needs confidence. Physical training builds character, she argued. I chuckled. Brenda, you can't force a fish to climb a tree. Tim's got a brilliant mind. Let him grow at his own pace. Maybe, she sighed, but he needs to toughen up. Life isn't always kind to the smart ones. Despite her best efforts, Tim never cracked wrestling. But what he did master was far more impressive: computers. He was a wizard with them. I didn't fully understand half the things he explained about coding and software, but I knew genius when I saw it. Like any proud parent, I let him find his own path. Tim grew up to be a tall, skinny man who earned his degree from MIT. Brenda didn't live to see that proud day. She passed away just before his graduation. Losing her was a blow that neither of us fully recovered from, but we carried on. 2 years after graduation, Tim married Natasha. To be honest, I never liked the girl. There was something about her, a certain air of entitlement that rubbed me the wrong way. But Tim was happy, and I'd always promised myself that I wouldn't meddle in his choices. Dad, Natasha's got a sharp mind, Tim once told me over dinner. She challenges me in ways no one else does. I nodded, though skepticism lingered in my chest. If she makes you happy, that's all that matters. And so, despite my reservations, I never protested about their union. But as I suspected, the problems came soon enough. One fine Saturday evening, I was at home when my phone rang. It was Tim. His voice was trembling, cracking under the weight of raw emotion. Dad, he sobbed, she's cheating on me. My chest tightened. Tim, slow down. What happened? I suspected it for a while, he stammered. So I hacked her phone. Dad, I found texts, Videos, pictures, all of it. She's been sleeping with another man. Anger and sadness surged through me in equal measure. Listen, Tim, I know this hurts, but we'll get through it. First thing you need to do is contact a lawyer. I have a good one. I'll send you his number. Okay, he sniffled. Thanks, Dad. I'll call him now. Good, I said firmly. Call me back after you've spoken to him. We'll figure this out together. That was the last conversation I ever had with my son. The next morning, my phone rang again. This time, it was the sheriff. Mr. McCarty, I'm sorry to inform you. Your son is gone. I felt the world tilt beneath me. What? No, that's not possible. I just spoke to him last night. He was upset, but I told him to call a lawyer. He promised he would. I understand, the sheriff said gently, but it looks like he took his own life. My voice was hoarse. There must be some mistake. I wish there was, he said solemnly. I'll need to ask you some questions. You mentioned speaking to him last night? Yes, I managed. He told me his wife Natasha was cheating on him. I gave him a lawyer's number and told him to call me back. He never did. The sheriff paused. We'll investigate that and get back to you. 3 days later, the sheriff called me. His voice was measured, as though delivering bad news had become a routine for him. Mr. McCarty, I've got the autopsy results. It confirms that Tim shot himself. Natasha admitted to the affair, but her alibi checks out. She was with a lawyer named Brendan Smith, her lover. I gritted my teeth, barely able to contain my anger. That's convenient, I said sharply. Did she mention anything else? She claims Tim knew about the affair and approved of it, the sheriff continued. I couldn't believe my ears. Approved? That's a damn lie, I exclaimed. He called me the night before. He was crying, for God's sake. He told me he just found out, hacked her phone, and saw everything. Why would he suddenly be fine with it? The sheriff sighed heavily. Look, Mr. McCarty, I'm just telling you what she said. We found gunpowder residue on Tim's right hand. He fired the shot. My breath hitched. I need to see the crime scene, I demanded. There was a brief pause. I can arrange that, he finally said. Come to Boston. I'll meet you there. The next day, I boarded a flight and landed in Boston with a hollow ache in my chest. As promised, the sheriff was waiting at Tim's apartment, still taped off with yellow crime scene barriers fluttering in the breeze. The air was thick with unease. Take your time, the sheriff said quietly as he opened the door. Once you're done, we'll hand over Tim's body to you. I froze at his next words. Natasha declined to claim it. Rage surged through me, hot and blinding. What? I spat. She won't even claim his body? He nodded solemnly. That's what she said. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to stay composed. I need to see the room, I said, my voice steady despite the anger simmering beneath the surface. The sheriff hesitated, glancing around as if weighing his options. This isn't exactly by the book, he admitted quietly. You can't leak this, McCarty. If this gets out, it's both our asses on the line. You have my word, I assured him, my tone firm. He nodded. Follow me. The yellow crime scene tape fluttered as we stepped through. The room was eerily silent, frozen in time like a grotesque photograph. The air was stale, thick with the faint metallic scent of blood. I scanned the space carefully. Where was Tim's body? I asked, my voice low but edged with tension. The sheriff gestured to a worn leather chair near the window. Right there. Slumped forward when we found him. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through the forensics photos before holding it up to me. The image hit like a gut punch. Tim, my boy, lifeless and cold. I swallowed hard, forcing the image from my mind. My gaze swept across the room, taking in every detail. Bookshelves neatly lined with programming manuals, a coffee mug with World's Best Coder emblazoned on it, and a desk cluttered with notes and circuit boards. But then something caught my eye, a patch of plaster near the far wall. It was subtle, but the color didn't quite match the rest of the wall. I stepped closer, pointing to the spot. Sheriff, come take a look at this. He frowned, moving beside me. What is it? That patch, it's off. Looks different from the rest of the wall. The sheriff squinted. Could be nothing. Or it could be something, I said firmly. He signaled to a nearby cop. Get forensics in here. Now. Within minutes, a technician arrived, lugging a black case of tools. The man knelt by the wall, examining the patch with a discerning eye. He pulled out a scraping tool and carefully removed a layer of plaster, revealing a jagged bullet hole beneath. The tech's brows furrowed. There's a bullet lodged in here. Match it to the murder weapon, I ordered, my voice hardening. How many shell casings did you find? The sheriff glanced at me uneasily. Just one. I felt my pulse quicken. So, 2 bullets, but only 1 shell? This is a murder, Butch, I said quietly, my voice steady but heavy with anger. The sheriff scratched his head, clearly unsettled. Look, I'll match the bullet to the gun, he said cautiously. But even if it matches, that doesn't prove someone else was here. I blinked, momentarily stunned by the sheer stupidity of that statement. I always knew you were dumb, Butch, I said, barely containing my frustration. But really? That dumb? His jaw tightened. Hey now, you're telling me Tim fired a shot into the wall, decided it looked messy, patched it up, and then shot himself? I stepped closer, my voice rising with disbelief. Did you find any repair tools in the house? Any plaster residue in this room? And why in God's name would a man about to kill himself care about fixing a bullet hole first? Butch opened his mouth but then closed it, realizing he had no good answer. I pressed on, relentless. And here's the biggest question, Sheriff, but you're gonna love this one. Why would an anti-gun activist even have a gun in the first place? Tim spoke at rallies, Butch. He wrote op-eds about gun control. He wouldn't touch a firearm, let alone own one. Butch shifted on his feet, clearly uncomfortable now. We checked the gun, he admitted grudgingly. Serial numbers were scratched off. I took a sharp breath. So, you're telling me, I said icily, that an MIT graduate, an anti-gun activist, somehow got his hands on a weapon with no serial number? I stared him down, disbelief thick in my tone. What kind of investigation is this? I took a deep breath, trying to steady my shaking hands as I looked at Butch. Did you check if Natasha is getting any money from Tim's death? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. And did you find any laptop or computer in the house? Butch seemed hesitant for a moment before answering. We checked the laptop. It was wiped clean. Looks like Tim did it just before his death. I rubbed my forehead, feeling a wave of frustration wash over me. Butch, you're telling me, I started, trying to control my temper, that an MIT graduate, who hacked into his wife's phone, who found out she was cheating on him, who gathered all the evidence, who called his father to tell him about it and even took a lawyer's number to file for a divorce, suddenly decides to wipe everything clean and kill himself? Butch didn't respond. His eyes went blank, and I could see that he was struggling to process it. Come on, Butch, I pressed, my voice rising in frustration. The whole thing screams murder. If Natasha didn't do it, she had someone else do it. Hell, she probably hired someone to take care of it. Check the call records of both her and her lover. Butch shifted uneasily, rubbing his neck. I'd need to get the DA's approval for that, he mumbled, sounding like he was trying to find an excuse. I stepped closer, my fists clenched at my sides. Butch, Tim was my son. My only son, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I need justice for him. I left the house and claimed Tim's body. I had him cremated and took the ashes back home. 2 weeks later, I sat at my desk, staring at the urn in front of me. Tim's ashes were all that was left of him. Every time I looked at that small urn, the pain in my chest tightened, reminding me that no one had fought hard enough to get him justice. But I had. I had pushed, I had questioned, and yet, the answers never came. I leaned back in my chair, trying to focus on something, anything, but the phone ringing broke my thoughts. It was Butch. Hey, Butch, I said, trying to keep my voice even, but my frustration bled through. Henry, I've got bad news. I straightened up, knowing what was coming. Don't tell me. They're closing the case, aren't they? There was a long pause before Butch finally spoke. Yeah, the DA wants the case closed. He's not going to approve the call screening. He says there's nothing more to investigate. That guy Brendan Smith comes from a big law firm, and DA is scared to touch him. I closed my eyes, pinching the bridge of my nose. What about the second bullet? What about the gun? There's got to be something you're missing. Butch, the bullet was fired from the same gun. And the gun belonged to Natasha. She mentioned it during the first interrogation, Butch explained, his voice tight. She kept it at home. I let out a harsh breath. So, she has a gun, and my son ends up dead. And that's it? No one's even looking at her? He hesitated, and I could hear the discomfort in his voice. She's not getting anything from his death. That much we can confirm. Nothing's changed there. I felt the weight of his words hit me like a punch to the gut. No inheritance, no money, but that didn't make it any less suspicious. She still had the means to end his life. Butch didn't know what to say next, and neither did I. It felt like the walls were closing in on me. All I could do was look at the urn again, knowing deep down that the fight for Tim wasn't over. But with every door that slammed shut, my hope for justice slowly crumbled. The phone call with Butch had left a bitter taste in my mouth, and the feeling of helplessness was gnawing at me. But then something inside me snapped. The legal avenues might be closed, but I had friends. And Nathan Hodge wasn't just any friend. He was a former Marine, sharp as hell, and now a private investigator in Boston. If anyone could dig into this, it was him. I didn't waste time. I dialed Nathan's number, and after a few rings, he answered. "Hodge," he said, his voice rough but steady, just like I remembered. "Nathan, it's Henry," I said. "I need your help. It's about Tim, my son." There was a brief silence before he responded. "I'm listening." I told him everything. About the case, about the evidence that had been ignored, and the questions that hung in the air like smoke. By the end of it, Nathan was quiet for a moment, thinking it over. "You know, I don't usually take cases like this, Henry," he finally said. "But for you, I'll make an exception. I'll look into it." I sighed, a small sense of relief washing over me. "Thank you, Nathan. I need you to dig into Natasha and Brandon. I know they're involved somehow, and I need answers." He was already thinking, his voice calm and sure. "I can hack their phones again, but I'll be honest, I don't expect to find much. It's been too long. They've probably cleaned everything up by now." I didn't let that stop me. "What about Tim? Do you think we could check his cloud data? Maybe he uploaded something before his death, something he didn't erase." Nathan was quiet for a moment, considering it. "All right, that's something we can work with. I'll go through it all. Shouldn't take too long to dig up any breadcrumbs." "Thank you," I said, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. "Just keep me updated, all right?" "You'll get an update within 2 weeks," he said, his tone assuring. "I'll make sure of it." I ended the call and leaned back in my chair, my eyes still on Tim's urn. Justice might not come from the police or the courts, but maybe Nathan could dig something up. Maybe this wasn't over yet. 2 weeks later, I finally got the call I was waiting for. It was Nathan. He asked me to book a flight and come to Boston immediately. The flight to Boston felt like it took forever. Every minute was another moment I spent waiting, hoping, praying that Nathan had found something. Anything that would give me the answers I so desperately needed. When I finally stepped off the plane and made my way to Nathan's office, the anticipation was almost unbearable. Nathan was already there, sitting behind his desk, looking as calm as ever. He didn't waste any time. As soon as I walked in, he gestured for me to sit. "Henry, it's good to see you. We've got some things to go over." He immediately made a call to his secretary. "Send James in, please." I didn't have to wait long. A few minutes later, the door opened and in walked a thin guy with large glasses. His appearance was almost cartoonish, but there was something about his demeanor that immediately told me he was more than just some computer geek. He had that quiet confidence, like a man who knew exactly what he was capable of, even if he didn't quite look the part. Nathan introduced him. "Henry, this is James Gordon. We call him Flash Gordon. He can hack into computers, phones, and accounts in a flash." James' handshake was quick and a little nervous, his fingers almost trembling as he gripped mine. His eyes were darting around the room, looking everywhere except at me. But his focus shifted quickly when Nathan gave him a nod. Without saying a word, James set his laptop down on the desk and connected it to the big flat-screen TV on the wall. I watched as he typed rapidly, his fingers flying over the keyboard like he was born to do this. The sound of keys clicking echoed through the room as the screen flickered to life. Nathan and I both sat silently, waiting for something to appear. Anything that would bring us closer to the truth. After a moment, the TV lit up with a series of files and programs that I didn't recognize, but I didn't need to understand what was on the screen. I just needed to see what James was about to pull up. James started. "I hacked into Natasha's phone and email account and all storages, did the same with that lawyer guy. I found that they are having an affair for the last 3 years, even before Natasha married Tim. Now, I also tried to locate Tim's cloud server and found it. He had it secured with an encryption, but it seemed like he wanted it to be found out." James' fingers paused over the keyboard for a brief moment before he hit a few more keys. I could feel my heart racing as the screen flickered, and a new file appeared on the TV. My breath caught in my chest as I read the name of the file. "Encrypted note." James cleared his throat and turned to me. "Henry, I'm gonna warn you. What you're about to see might be hard to process. But this is what we found." He opened the file, and a notepad document appeared on the screen. I leaned in, my eyes scanning the words with a growing sense of dread. It was a letter, Tim's letter. I could barely breathe as I read it aloud in a whisper, the weight of it sinking deep into my chest. "Dad, I just heard their calls. They plan to kill me and make it look like a suicide. I have all the evidence here in the other folders, and if I die, please, don't spare them." I froze, my hand gripping the edge of the desk. My mind was reeling. My son, my boy. He knew. Tim had known all along. He had heard their plan, and he had gathered the evidence. All this time, I thought I was the one digging for answers, but Tim had already found them, just before they took him. I looked up at James, my voice barely a rasp. Is this real? James nodded, his face grim. It's all there, Henry. I don't think he was ever planning on dying like that. He was trying to get the truth out. I couldn't speak. The lump in my throat was choking me. I stared at the screen, at my son's final message. This was it. This was what I had been waiting for, what I had feared. My son had known he was being hunted, and he had left everything behind to make sure the truth came out. But I couldn't stop thinking of his last words. Don't spare them. And I knew in that moment. I couldn't. I wouldn't. Nathan stepped in. He walked over to James, his voice low but firm. I want you to destroy all the evidence you found and never speak to anyone about this, he said. James nodded, his face unreadable, and without a word, he turned and walked out of the room. Nathan sat back in his chair, his eyes distant, lost in thought. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Finally, he broke it. Will you not ask why I asked him to delete the evidence? I shook my head. Nope, I replied simply. He leaned forward, his eyes locking onto mine. Remember, Alice, he said, and just like that, my mind was dragged back to Iraq. Codename Alice. William Brown. Our brother. He had been kidnapped, tortured, and killed by the enemy. When we finally got the intel to go in and rescue him, it was too late. All we found was a burnt lump of flesh, barely recognizable as human. The enemy combatants had wanted to surrender, but we weren't in the mood for mercy. We wanted blood, and we got it. No one was spared. Not a single soul. Not even their dog. Nathan's voice pulled me back to the present. You need me in this, he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. I stood up, my mind already racing with plans. I need locations and intel, I said. The rest, I'll handle myself. Nathan got up and walked over to me, his expression grave. I never had this conversation with you, he said. I never met you, and James never found anything. I reached out and shook his hand, my grip firm. No one will find anything, I said, my voice steady. And with that, the deal was sealed. Nathan released my hand after a long moment, his expression hardening, and I turned to leave. As I walked out of his office, my mind was already on the next step. There was no more time for hesitation. What I had to do now wasn't just about justice for Tim. It was about finishing what I had started, about making sure no one got away with murder. I went back home and stayed connected with Nathan over the next 2 months. What did I do for the next 2 months? I got back in the gym. The gym sessions had been tough, but they were necessary. At 56, the body didn't bounce back the way it used to. But the sweat, the pain, the grind, it helped me focus. It helped me get my mind off the fact that nothing was happening. Tim's case was still closed. The cops had washed their hands of it. And every day that went by, I had to live with the knowledge that no one was going to make them pay. But Nathan, he kept me in the loop. He kept an eye on Natasha and Brendan, feeding me intel on their routines, where they went, who they saw. He didn't need to tell me, but I knew. He was as invested in this as I was. Maybe more. Finally, it came time to make a move. I called Nathan late on a Friday evening. Scarlet is coming to town, I said, using the old code name. Back in the Marines, we were 3 friends, and as a joke we had code names. William Brown was Alice, I was Scarlet, and Nathan was Lucy. Nathan's voice came through the line, low and steady. Good. I'll be there by evening. It wasn't long after that Nathan was driving from Boston to meet me in Atlantic City. The man was relentless. We made the trip back to Boston together in under 15 hours. The whole ride was a blur of tense conversation, checking the plan, confirming details. We didn't have time for small talk anymore. We reached Boston at 5 a.m. on Saturday, and the sun was just starting to rise. The city was quiet, almost empty at that hour. We parked the car, and Nathan gave me a sharp look. Now we rest at my place and wait, he said. I nodded. Waiting was never easy, but it was necessary. We weren't going to act recklessly. Not yet. I glanced at my watch. Tonight, I muttered under my breath. Tonight, it happens. Nathan grunted in response, always the professional. We just need the right moment. The plan was in place. Everything was set. Now, we had to wait for the night to set in. That evening, as the clock ticked closer to our moment, I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins. We left Nathan's place quietly. We had no gadgets, phones, anything that could tie us to the outside world. The goal was to remain as invisible as possible. Back home, My house was still lit up. Nathan had arranged for James to remotely access my phone and keep posting happy pictures of Tim and me, geotagged to make it seem like I was still in Atlantic City. No one would suspect that I was in Boston. We reached the club where Natasha and Brendan were supposed to be. Timing was everything, and we had to stay patient. The parking lot was poorly lit, just enough to give us some cover. James had already hacked into the cameras surrounding the place, so we knew the exact moment they'd leave. Around 1 a.m., we saw them emerge. Natasha, with her fake smile, arm linked with Brendan's. They didn't see us as we followed, keeping a safe distance. The walk to their car was slow. Nathan's eyes met mine. "You ready?" he whispered. I nodded. As Natasha and Brendan reached their car, we made our move. Nathan and I stepped quickly, side by side, shadows in the night. Before they even realized we were there, we struck, swift and hard. We hit them both on the back of their heads. The thud of their skulls against the concrete was satisfying in a way I couldn't describe. They crumpled to the ground without a sound. We dragged them both into the car and drove without a word. The engine hummed as we made our way to the outskirts of the city. The abandoned warehouse was secluded, quiet, far enough from prying eyes. The kind of place where no one would hear anything that might happen next. When we got inside, we quickly tied them up. Nathan worked methodically, his movements precise as always. We made sure they couldn't escape. Both of them were still unconscious. I couldn't help but glance at them, two people who had stolen my son's life. They had to pay, and I wasn't going to let them get away with it. We both had masks on, and we wore gloves. It wasn't long before Natasha stirred. She groggily blinked her eyes, trying to make sense of where she was. Her eyes widened when she saw Nathan and me standing over her, and she tried to scream. But Nathan was quick. He shoved a cloth into her mouth before she could make a sound. I leaned in, my voice steady, but carrying the weight of years of pain. "I'm going to ask this only once. Why did you kill Tim?" She shook her head frantically, her eyes filled with fear and confusion. She was trying to deny it, but the evidence was too overwhelming. Nathan pulled the cloth away from her mouth, his voice calm but firm. "Answer him." "I didn't kill him," she whispered, shaking her head, her voice trembling. "I didn't." Before I could respond, Brendan stirred beside her. He groaned, his eyes squinting against the dim light of the room. He blinked a few times, trying to make sense of what was happening. His gaze locked onto me, then Nathan. There was recognition in his eyes, but also confusion. I couldn't contain my rage any longer. My hand shot out, landing a slap across his face, hard enough to make him snap his head to the side. His eyes widened in pain as he looked back at me, but I wasn't done. "Why did you kill Tim?" I repeated, my voice barely containing the fury bubbling inside me. Brendan's eyes widened with terror, and he opened his mouth to speak, but I wasn't having any of it. I slapped him again, hard, right across the face. His head snapped back from the force, and a trickle of blood dripped from his split lip. His wide eyes were filled with a mixture of pain and fear. I turned away, my boots thudding against the floor as I walked toward the corner of the room. The sledgehammer leaned against the wall, cold and heavy. I grabbed it by the handle and dragged it. It was an instrument of justice, as far as I was concerned. I walked back toward them, the hammer in my hands, and I looked at Natasha. My voice was low, almost casual, but it carried the edge of a man on the edge of losing everything. "If you lie," I said, pointing the hammer toward Brendan, "the hammer will come down on him. And when he's done, it'll come down on you." I could see Natasha's face pale, her body stiff with dread, but she didn't speak. She was too scared, and I could see the panic slowly starting to take over. One more time, I raised the hammer. "Why did you kill Tim?" Natasha's eyes darted between me and Brendan, and then I brought the sledgehammer down, crashing it into Brendan's foot. His body jerked violently as a scream fought to break free, but Nathan was quick. He shoved the cloth back into Brendan's mouth. Brendan's eyes were wide with pain, tears streaming down his face. Natasha couldn't hide her horror anymore. Her hands clenched against the ropes that held her, her breath quickening. Then, finally, Natasha's voice quivered, each word heavy with guilt, but she was speaking now. Finally, after all the waiting, all the frustration, she was speaking. "Tim was going to expose me and Brendan. His whole career would have been gone," she said, her voice shaking. "We had to silence him. He gave us no choice." I clenched my fists. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I had been holding on to a shred of hope that maybe there was more to this than I realized. But now, Brendan's career was more important than my son's life. "Who killed him?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, but full of venom. She was silent again, and I could feel her hesitation. Once again, I picked up the hammer. This time, I didn't hesitate. I swung it down with all my might onto Brendan's other foot. He screamed into the cloth in his mouth, his body convulsing. Natasha flinched, her eyes wide with horror. She shook, her breath quickening. Finally, she spoke. "It was me, but we never planned it. It was an accident," she stammered, and I could see her trying to justify what she had done, but I wasn't buying it. She was lying, trying to spin a story to make herself look less guilty. I wasn't having it. I raised my hand, signaling her to stop. "Don't lie," I said, my voice cold. "You already planned it. Tim knew about your plan." She was silent again, and I could see her fighting with herself, trying to come up with an excuse, something that would save her from the inevitable. Without thinking, I swung the hammer again, this time bringing it down on Brendan's knee. He screamed, his body convulsing before going limp. He passed out from the pain, his face contorted in agony. Natasha watched him, her eyes wide, fear written all over her face. She looked back at me, shaking now, and finally, she broke. "Yes," she whispered, barely audible. "We set him up. He was going to expose our videos. That would have ruined Brendan's career at the law firm. Tim also threatened to sue the law firm. Brendan and I work together, and our firm is very strict with these rules. Getting fired from there would have ruined our lives. So, we had to either convince him to walk away, or we had to get rid of him. I tried to convince him to look the other way, but he was adamant to expose me. So, we decided to get rid of him. I went home and kept the gun at his desk. When he came to his desk, he picked it up. Me and Brendan went in the room and threatened him. He got scared and panicked and fired the shot. We knew he had no idea what to do with the gun, and we took a chance that he would miss the shot. In the worst-case scenario, he would hit one of us, and we would be able to trap him in with a criminal charge against him. The bullet was specially modified. We reduced the gunpowder, and that reduced the speed of the bullet. It would not have been fatal. There was only one bullet in the gun when he fired it. Then I tried to pacify him, took the gun away from him. He was crying, and I handed the gun to Brendan. He loaded a round and gave it to me. I killed Tim. Then tried to get the bullet in the wall out, but we did not have the tools. So, we got some plaster of Paris and covered the hole in the wall, cleaned the room, took the bullet casing and wiped Tim's laptop clean. Then left the house. We were each other's alibi, so no one will come for us. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt the air leave my lungs, the realization sinking in. The betrayal, the lies, the death of my son. It was all here, laid bare in front of me. She killed him. Natasha broke down, her shoulders shaking violently as sobs tore through her. The weight of what she just admitted finally seemed to hit her fully. She gasped for air, tears streaming down her face, unable to look at me. I walked slowly toward her and pulled off my mask, the fabric falling to the floor without a sound. "Natasha," I said, my voice steady and cold, "look at me." She shook her head violently, her eyes squeezed shut. "Please, I'm sorry," she choked out between sobs. "No," I commanded firmly. "Look into my eyes." Reluctantly, trembling like a cornered animal, she lifted her head and met my gaze. Her tear-filled eyes locked with mine, wide with fear and desperation. "I want you to hear what I have to say," I continued, stepping closer. My voice was low but filled with the unshakable weight of resolve. "I am here on behalf of the complainant and victim, Timothy McCarty. I am his father. I am the judge, the jury, and the executioner. I, the Scarlet Judge, hereby find you, Natasha Morgan and Brendan Smith, guilty of the murder of Timothy McCarty, and I sentence you both to hell." I walked to the side of the room where 2 barrels of gasoline had been sitting, waiting for this exact moment. Natasha's broken pleas for mercy faded into the background, meaningless noise to me now. I lifted the barrels one by one, pouring their contents over Natasha and Brendan, soaking their clothes, their skin. The acrid smell filled the room, sharp and overpowering. Natasha screamed, her voice hoarse and raw, thrashing in her bindings as if she could somehow escape the inevitable. Brendan, unconscious and limp, was silent. I pulled a single matchstick from my pocket, my fingers steady despite the storm raging inside me. I struck it against the box with a sharp crack. The tiny flame flickered to life, casting eerie shadows across their faces. Natasha's wild eyes met mine one last time, full of horror and disbelief. "Please," she begged through sobs. "Don't. Please." I didn't speak. I flicked the match toward them. The flames roared to life instantly, consuming the gasoline-soaked bodies with a ferocious hunger. Heat blasted against my face, the orange glow dancing across the walls as smoke curled toward the ceiling. I stood there, unmoving, as their screams were swallowed by the crackling inferno. The fire raged on, consuming every last trace of the monsters who had taken my son from me, and I watched them burn. Nathan stepped closer through the thick haze of smoke and the fading heat. His eyes, sharp and resolute, softened when they met mine. Without a word, he pulled me into a firm embrace. "We have to move, Scarlet," he said quietly, his voice steady but urgent. "Time to go." I nodded, my throat too tight for words. The fire behind us crackled and roared, its ravenous flames reducing everything to ash. No evidence, no trail, just justice served. We slipped back into the car, the night still cloaked in eerie silence. Nathan navigated the dark streets effortlessly, the wheels humming steadily against the pavement. I stared out the window, my mind numb, the weight of what we'd done pressing against my chest. But oddly, it wasn't suffocating anymore. It was lighter. Hours later, we pulled into my driveway in Atlantic City. The early morning sun stretched lazily across the horizon, bathing the street in a warm glow. Nathan parked the car and looked at me with quiet understanding. "You'll be okay," he said simply, giving my shoulder a firm squeeze. I swallowed hard, nodding. "Thanks, Lucy." He smirked faintly at the old code name. "Anytime, Scarlet." He leaned back against his seat. "You know where to find me if you need anything." "I know," I said quietly, getting out of the car. As I walked up to my front door, the usual weight that clung to me was gone. My steps were slow, deliberate, but for the first time in months, I felt like I wasn't dragging chains behind me. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, the familiar scent of home wrapping itself around me. But today, it was different. I closed the door gently behind me and stood in the quiet living room, the sunlight filtering through the curtains. My gaze drifted to the shelf where Tim's ashes rested in a simple, elegant urn. My knees weakened, and I stumbled forward, picking up the urn with trembling hands. All at once, the dam inside me broke. I collapsed onto the floor, clutching the urn against my chest as sobs racked my body. "I'm sorry, Tim," I whispered through the tears. "I'm so sorry I couldn't protect you." I cried until my chest ached, until there was nothing left inside me but raw, hollow grief. The rage, the bitterness, all of it had been burned away in that fire. Now there was only sorrow and love, tangled together in an ache I knew would never fully leave. Through blurred eyes, I glanced up at the photographs on the mantel, Tim's smiling face beside my wife's radiant, gentle expression, the laughter and warmth frozen in time. I tried to hold on to those moments, to remember the good times. 3 days later, my phone buzzed, Sheriff Butch's name flashing on the screen. I swiped to answer. "Hey, Henry," Butch's gruff voice came through, casual but with an undertone of something else. "How are you?" "I'm good, Butch. How about you?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. You know, same old grind," he said, then cleared his throat. "Listen, I need to know. Where were you on the 25th of March? I tensed slightly but kept my voice steady. "At home." "Why?" "Yeah, I figured," he said, his tone shifting awkwardly. But what, Sheriff?" I pressed, sharper now. There was a pause on the line. "We found Natasha and Brendan's bodies in a warehouse outside Boston," he finally said, as if testing the waters. I kept my breathing even. "Okay, and what exactly does that have to do with me?" No, nothing," Butch backpedaled quickly. "Just curious, seeing if you had any connection." My voice hardened. "Are you seriously trying to imply that a Marine who served his country, upheld the law for 15 years, and now sits as a judge would commit murder? Are you out of your damn mind, Butch?" "No," he stammered, caught off guard. "It's just, you know how it is. The DA wanted me to ask. Nothing personal." I let out a bitter laugh, low and cold. "Tell your DA this. If he wants to come at me, tell him to come with all guns blazing. Otherwise, tell him to sit down and shut the hell up." Silence stretched between us. Butch had nothing more to say. I didn't wait. I hung up. The phone buzzed, Nathan's name on the screen. I answered immediately. "Henry," he said, getting straight to the point. "They're holding a funeral service for Natasha and Brendan at the local church tomorrow." I leaned back in my chair, my jaw tightening. "Is that so?" "Yeah," Nathan confirmed, his tone flat. "It's going to be one of those showy community gatherings. Lots of people paying fake respects." I exhaled slowly, the wheels already turning in my mind. Then I guess, I said calmly, it's time to send a message. People need to know that despite a corrupt DA and incompetent cops, justice will be served. Nathan chuckled lightly. You've got something in mind, don't you? Always, I replied. I'll handle it. The next morning, I stood in the shadows near the delivery entrance of the funeral home, watching the floral arrangements arrive. A sea of white roses, lilies, and carnations flooded the room. A false display of purity for two murderers who'd been anything but innocent. I slipped the single black lily into the mix, its dark bloom stark against the sea of pale flowers. The card was simple yet powerful, handwritten in bold strokes. Natasha and Brendan, you were judged and executed by the Scarlet Judge for the crimes you committed. You were notified and informed about them at the time of your execution. Let this be a message to all. Justice will be served despite obstacles. It may be delayed, but it is inevitable. Signed, S. Judge. The aftermath of the funeral note was chaos. I watched from afar as the DA's office crumbled under pressure. The media hounded Butch until he was suspended, and the DA quietly resigned, unable to handle the weight of public scrutiny. They never found out what Natasha and Brendan had done. Conveniently, all the evidence had vanished during their so-called investigation. Nobody wanted the truth to come out anyway. Not really. But everyone knew now. There was someone out there who didn't answer to corruption or bureaucracy. Someone to fear. 7 months passed quietly. I kept my head down, focusing on my work as if nothing had changed. But Nathan never stayed quiet for long. His name lit up my phone one late evening. Nathan, I answered. What's the word? Got a name for you, he said without preamble. Ethan Grant Sullivan. Never heard of him, I replied, leaning back in my chair. You will? Nathan assured me, his voice steady. He's having an affair with a woman named Laura. She's married to a guy named Ryan. I frowned. People cheat all the time. What makes this guy special? Nathan let out a dry laugh. This isn't a one-off thing, Henry. This Ethan guy's been wrecking marriages for years. He moves in, charms the women, ruins families, and disappears. Leaves husbands broken and women humiliated. The familiar weight settled over my chest, a call for justice. Sounds like he's overdue for some accountability, I said coldly. Nathan's voice hardened. I figured you'd say that. I thought you should know. I smiled faintly, my resolve already set. The Scarlet Judge will judge him soon.